What if the man we see on TV as Vladimir Putin isn't really him at all? What if behind closed doors, Donald Trump's talks with Volodymyr Zelenskyy are shaped by unseen Russian pressure? In this video, we uncover the shocking claims of Putin's body doubles, the high-stakes Trump-Zelenskyy meeting, and the question the world is asking: is Trump playing his own game or Moscow's? Trump and Zelenskyy meeting. Is Trump pressurized from Russia? For years, speculation about Russian President Vladimir Putin's use of body doubles has fascinated analysts, fueled conspiracy theories, and provided endless material for political debate. The mystery is amplified by the opaque nature of Kremlin politics and Russia's tradition of secrecy in matters of leadership and security. When the war in Ukraine broke out in 2022, these rumors intensified. People around the world began to closely examine Putin's public appearances, pointing out alleged differences in his facial structure, posture, walk, and most notably the shape of his ears. In forensic science, ears are considered almost as unique as fingerprints, so when observers noticed inconsistencies, the theory of multiple Putins began to spread widely. Ukrainian intelligence chief Kirill Budanov even stated in interviews that he believed Putin had employed body doubles on certain occasions, particularly during visits to conflict zones like Mariupol. His claim rested on visible differences in height and body language, suggesting that perhaps the man seen shaking hands with soldiers or meeting citizens was not the original Putin but an imposter carefully trained to mimic his gestures. Despite the persistence of these claims, no verifiable evidence has ever emerged to confirm them. Putin himself addressed the matter directly in a 2020 interview with the Russian news agency TASS, where he explained that during the height of terrorist threats in the early 2000s, security officials suggested using doubles to protect him during high-risk events. He claimed he rejected the idea outright, insisting he would never use a substitute. This public denial did little to dampen speculation, as skeptics pointed out that if he had agreed to use body doubles, he would never admit it publicly. The Kremlin, for its part, has dismissed the theory as Western propaganda designed to undermine Russian stability and project the image of weakness at the top of the Russian state. Still, conspiracy theories thrive in environments where information is tightly controlled, and because Russia remains one of the world's most secretive states, people continue to believe what they see as clues, pointing toward impersonation. Historically, the use of doubles is not unheard of in politics and warfare. Leaders under constant threat have often employed decoys to confuse enemies or reduce the risk of assassination. Joseph Stalin is said to have used lookalikes during World War II. Saddam Hussein of Iraq was believed to have deployed several body doubles to appear in public while keeping the real leader secure. Even Henry Kissinger, according to some accounts, had a double during tense Cold War travels. Against this backdrop, the Putin body double theory does not sound entirely far-fetched. But unlike Saddam or Stalin, no concrete evidence, such as testimony from insiders, leaked documents, or captured doubles, has ever surfaced to confirm Putin's supposed reliance on lookalikes. What makes the idea so compelling is less the proof and more the narrative. A Russia where the leader might be so fearful of attack that he surrounds himself with decoys, or alternatively, so ill or weakened that his appearances must be staged by substitutes. Either scenario fuels Western commentary and keeps speculation alive, even if reality suggests Putin remains the same man who has ruled Russia for over 2 decades. While speculation about Putin's health and doubles continues, global attention has also focused heavily on diplomatic developments involving Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. On August 18, 2025, Washington, D.C. became the stage for one of the most closely watched meetings of the year. Former President Donald Trump, in his second term, hosted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, along with a number of key European leaders. The meeting came shortly after Trump's high-profile summit with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, which had already raised eyebrows about the United States' direction in the Ukraine war. Analysts described the Washington gathering as a moment of potential breakthrough, but also of deep uncertainty, as the United States appeared to recalibrate its stance on Ukraine's future. The meeting itself was markedly different from the explosive Oval Office encounter earlier in 2025, which had been described by insiders as filled with shouting, finger-pointing, and an almost complete diplomatic collapse. By contrast, the August meeting carried a far warmer tone. Cameras captured Trump smiling alongside Zelensky, with both men praising the constructive nature of the dialogue. Trump appeared far more diplomatic, and the optics suggested reconciliation rather than conflict. Yet beneath these smiles, the actual substance of the discussions revealed tensions that could shape the course of the war. Trump reiterated his opposition to Ukraine's membership in NATO, a position he has held consistently. Instead, he supported the idea of NATO-style security guarantees for Ukraine, led primarily by European allies rather than by Washington itself. This left open the question of whether the United States was stepping back from its role as the guarantor of European security, effectively shifting responsibility to NATO's European members. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of the talks was Trump's apparent openness to territorial concessions. Reports from inside the meeting suggested that Trump was willing to consider peace deals that involved land swaps or de facto recognition of Russian control over parts of eastern Ukraine. This stance aligned closely with Putin's position, which demands recognition of annexed regions as a starting point for negotiations. European leaders present at the meeting were alarmed by this possibility. For them, the principle of territorial integrity is non-negotiable. They argued that any move to recognize Russian control over Ukrainian land would set a dangerous precedent, encouraging further aggression not just in Eastern Europe but globally. Moreover, they stressed that negotiations could not move forward without a ceasefire in place, whereas Trump seemed prepared to discuss peace terms while hostilities continued. For Kyiv, this raised the fear that Ukraine might be pressured into a disadvantageous deal that undermined its sovereignty and rewarded Russian aggression. The idea of a trilateral summit involving Trump, Zelensky, and Putin was floated during the Washington meeting, though no specific date or format was set. Such a summit, if it happens, could become one of the most significant diplomatic events of the decade, potentially deciding Ukraine's fate. Yet it also carries the risk of sidelining Ukraine by placing its future in the hands of external powers. European leaders welcomed the renewed dialogue but warned against a grand bargain struck over Ukraine's head. Russian state media, however, portrayed the Washington talks as a diplomatic victory for Moscow, interpreting Trump's positions as proof that Russia's resilience on the battlefield was paying dividends at the negotiating table. All of this raises the central question: is Donald Trump being pressurized by Russia? The suspicion that Trump may be under Moscow's influence has dogged his political career since before he first entered the White House in 2017. Much of this stems from the infamous Steele dossier, which alleged that Russia held compromising material, known as compromat, on Trump. Though much of the dossier remains unverified and has been discredited in parts, the idea that Russia might have leverage over Trump has persisted. The Mueller investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election also revealed numerous contacts between Trump's associates and Russian officials, though it ultimately concluded there was insufficient evidence to prove a criminal conspiracy. Still, the perception lingered. Trump was seen by many as unusually soft on Russia, often praising Putin in public remarks while criticizing America's traditional allies in NATO. Trump's foreign policy patterns only reinforced this perception. During his first term, he repeatedly questioned the value of NATO, called it obsolete, and suggested the United States should not automatically defend allies who did not meet spending commitments. In the Ukraine conflict, he has echoed Russian narratives at times, describing the war as something Europe must solve and portraying American involvement as unnecessary. His reluctance to provide unqualified support for Ukraine, his openness to territorial compromises, and his eagerness to engage directly with Putin all suggest a diplomatic approach more favorable to Moscow than to Kyiv or Brussels. Critics argue that this cannot be explained simply as Trump's negotiation style. Rather, they see it as evidence of Russian pressure, whether through hidden leverage or political alignment. Supporters, however, argue that Trump's approach is rooted in pragmatism. They point to his history of transactional diplomacy, where he seeks to strike bold deals that create headlines, regardless of ideological alignment. From this perspective, Trump is not pressured by Russia, but simply pursuing what he sees as the quickest way to end the war, even if it means concessions unpopular in the West. The truth may lie somewhere between these interpretations. There is no public evidence that Russia is coercing Trump with threats or blackmail. Yet his diplomatic choices often mirror Moscow's interests, creating the perception of alignment. Whether this is intentional, the result of genuine belief in transactional politics, or a calculated move to appeal to segments of his domestic political base is difficult to determine. What is clear is that Russia sees Trump's posture as advantageous. Russian officials and state media welcomed the Washington meeting's outcomes, portraying them as signs that the United States is shifting toward Moscow's preferred framework for peace. For Ukraine and its European partners, this is deeply concerning, as it raises the possibility that the war could end on terms dictated more by Russia's strength than by Ukraine's rights as a sovereign state. In summary, the intertwined narratives of Putin's alleged body doubles, Trump's evolving relationship with Zelensky, and the question of Russian pressure on American policy create a complex picture of modern geopolitics. The body double theory reflects the fascination and suspicion surrounding Russia's leadership, though it remains unproven. The Trump-Zelensky meeting highlights both progress and peril, as dialogue reopens, but at the cost of potentially dangerous concessions. And the question of whether Trump is under Russian pressure illustrates how perception and policy can blur, creating narratives that shape global politics even in the absence of definitive proof. Together, these elements reveal how much the Ukraine conflict is influenced not just by tanks and missiles on the battlefield, but by personalities, rumors, and the delicate balance of international diplomacy.